Hello everyone, this is Showtime 112. After a long time, we are revisiting the Iran-Iraq War, which was fought between 1980 and 1988. Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein launched an invasion of Iran, believing he could take advantage of his neighbor's situation, where a powerful military was seriously weakened by the Islamic Revolution of 1979. New leaders of Iran saw most officers as a threat to their regime, and their ranks were purged by early retirements, imprisonments, or even executions. This was particularly true for the Iranian Air Force, which was the favorite of now deposed Shah. Before the revolution, Iranian Air Force was one of the most powerful in the Middle East, operating three types of American-built fighter aircraft: F-5, F-4, and F-14. F-5s were first introduced to Iranian service in 1960s in their earlier A and B Freedom Fighter variant, but Iran replaced them in 1970s with a more advanced Tiger II. When the war began, F-5s were used very intensively in various tasks such as close air support, interdiction, and combat air patrols. Their losses were the highest of all Iranian fighter types. 49% of airplanes and 46% of pilots available in 1979 were lost. Among other factors, their relative simplicity and lack of advanced electronic systems made them more vulnerable to Iraqi surface-to-air missiles. Most of those losses took place in the early phase of the war. They were, however, not in vain, because Iraqi advance into Iran was stopped and lost ground was recovered by Iranians. Air operations were then reduced, since Iran had no way to replace the aircraft losses after cutting all ties to the United States, and with other big military aircraft producers supporting Iraq. Iraq, on the other hand, initially operated Soviet aircraft such as MiG-21, 23, and 25. While the first two were generally inferior to American fighters on the Iranian side, MiG-25 would prove a headache to Iran. This became especially obvious during the so-called War of the Cities phase. Both sides would attempt to lower their opponents' morale by bombing large cities, although Iraq is considered to be the one to start this practice. One of the weapons used by Iraq for this purpose was MiG-25 RB variant. This type was primarily a reconnaissance platform, but it was also able to drop bombs from high altitude using its Peleng D navigation suit. Release was automatic and precision was very low. According to Yefim Gordon's book about MiG-25, bombs would drop in a 2 by 2 kilometer box. According to an interview with a former Iraqi Air Force general, the bombs would fall anywhere within 10 kilometers of the target. They would still hit the city, and that was probably considered good enough. Interceptions of Iraqi MiG-25s would prove very difficult, even for the F-14s armed with mighty Phoenix missiles. A few kills by the Tomcats, although disputed, might have been scored, but we won't go into that in this video. Iraqis had a very good picture of Iranian radar coverage. Good intelligence apparently came from an Iranian defector. No attempt to acquire additional ground radars was made by Iran during the war. MiG-25 intrusions were countered by combat air patrols flown by all three types, including F-5. Iraqis took advantage of this. On 3rd of June 1985, they set up a trap. Instead of MiG-25 RB, they sent an interceptor variant which shot down an Iranian F-5E with two R-40 missiles, but F-5s would get a chance to fight back. One method of pressure used by Iraq against Iran was to proclaim that the whole territory of Iran was a war zone and that no airliners were allowed to enter its airspace. Iraqi MiG-25s attempted to intercept airliners flying between Iran and Turkey, but they were not successful. A big challenge for the Iraqis was the endurance of MiG-25. It was capable of reaching speeds approaching Mach 3, but it required afterburners to attain them. When returning to Iraqi airspace, MiG-25s had to conserve fuel and practically glide back at military power, converting altitude into speed. That's when they became vulnerable because a slow MiG-25 is sluggish and almost defenseless. After several unsuccessful attempts, a MiG-25 was detected over Ardabil on July 4, 1986, trying to catch a passenger plane flying to Turkey. Two F-5Es from TFB-2 at Tabriz were scrambled. They were flown by Colonel Mohammad Zadeh Nejad and Captain Majid Shabani. Ground control first told them to climb to 12,000 feet. They were directed north, then south, and finally they were told that the target was at 12 o'clock and high above them. F-5s engaged the afterburners and dropped fuel tanks. Radars were kept at standby, knowing that MiG-25 had a good radar warning receiver. Colonel Zadeh Nejad spotted the intruder and approached within the range of his sidewinders. When he attempted to launch, nothing happened. Apparently, there was a malfunction and the missile simply stayed on their rails. Zadeh Nejad then switched to his guns and opened fire. He emptied his entire load and then he saw a smoke trail coming from the Iraqi MiG. Two Iranian F-5s were now at critical fuel state and they turned back toward their airbase. Colonel Zadeh Nejad didn't claim a kill because he only witnessed his opponent being damaged. Iraqis never admitted the loss of this MiG-25. However, it seems that this was an actual shoot-down, the reasons for which we will now discuss. According to two main sources used here, Iraqi MiG-25 was able to make an emergency landing on a forward airstrip, after which it was written off. The primary source for this video is Iranian Tigers at War, written by Babak Tagvei, an Iranian author. The second source, that for the most part agrees with the story, is Tom Cooper. If you're into post-World War II military aviation, you probably know who he is. Without him, we in the West would know very little about Arab, Iranian, or African air forces and their operations in various wars. Cooper visited Iran and Iraq back in 2001, trying to research the conflict between those two nations. He found the Iranian side far more cooperative, but there was one notable exception. Iraqi Brigadier General Ahmad Sadiq gave him an interview in 2005, and he confirmed that the Iraqi MiG-25 damaged by Iranian F-5s had indeed been written off, and that he had personally inspected it. That makes it a kill for the F-5. There are two things where Cooper and Tagvei disagree. According to Cooper, this was a MiG-25RB returning from an attack on Tehran, and two F-5s were diverted from a ground attack mission. Tagvey writes that this was an interceptor trying to intercept an airliner, while two F-5s were on QRA. This is the version reenacted in the video. F-5 still serve in the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force. They were even the basis for some new indigenously developed models. If you liked the video, be sure to press the like button. If you're able to, support the channel on Patreon to ensure future content. Subscribe if you haven't already, and keep watching Showtime 112.